Will I make another game? That is a question I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's the question that people keep asking me. Mark, are you going to make another video game? But the thought of making another full, big Steam release, I'm not sure I've got that in me. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to do that. So next time you see me, it will just be my disembodied voice, and that means it is time to dismantle the developing studio, aka my spare room. Turn off that light, turn off this light. Let's get rid of this. Thank you and goodbye. Hi, me again. Yeah, I was really not expecting to be here in the formless blue void of the developing studio anytime soon, but I guess I've got some explaining to do. Right, so last year I finally finished my first proper Steam game, Mind Over Magnet. After a long and frankly torturous development period, I finished all the content, polished it up, and plopped it on Steam. And then, with all of that game development stuff finally out of my system, the plan was to take December off and then go back to being a full-time YouTuber in 2025. You know, go back to having a proper, regular upload schedule. Oh, I just had one teensy-weensy obligation to fulfill at the end of the year. Because you know the GMTK Game Jam, right? We've got a new one coming up on July 30th. Well, we've also started doing a secret second jam just for GMTK Patreon supporters. Now that happened in December of 2024, and I had almost forgot that I had promised that I too would take part in this jam. Oops. Okay, so I'll just make a tiny game for this jam, then take the rest of the year off, and then go back to being a YouTuber in 2025. Okay, so the theme for this jam, which was picked by a Byzantine conclave-like series of suggestions and secret votes, ended up being Bending the Rules, which gave me an idea for a game. Basically, you make a spelling game, like Boggle or Scrabble, and then when the player has scored enough points to level up, they get to unlock some kind of upgrade or modifier that changes the rules and makes it easier to spell words and score points. Maybe you can add a few extra Z tiles to the bag, or Q tiles now become QU tiles, or your word scores more points if it starts with a vowel, that sort of thing. Essentially combine a word game with the roguelike shenanigans of a Balatro, or a Vampire Survivors, or a Slay the Spire. So that's what I did. I made a system that would give you a random selection of 16 letters. You can click on them to create words, and then it checks your words against a dictionary. There's a nifty open source dictionary with about 200,000 words, so it checks against that list, and if it's on there, you score points. And then I added in some upgrades. Multipliers for longer words, multipliers on specific letters, a wild card that can be used in place of any letter, a power-up that lets you hold some tiles and refresh the others. And then within just 2 days, I had built a game. Now it was an ugly, slightly broken and obviously unfinished prototype of a game, but it was something. And it was actually quite good fun. And other people agreed. Almost everyone I showed the game to got a bit hooked. One person told me that they played this scrappy 2-day prototype for more hours than they spent playing the entire campaign of Mind Over Magnet. And when I posted about it in a Discord full of friends, as soon as one person posted a screenshot of their results page, everyone wanted to have a go and see how they could get on. The game obviously had appeal. And so I started to think, maybe I should make this into a full game. And I know, sure, I struggled to juggle game development and being a YouTuber throughout the development of Mind Over Magnet. And I know that the plan was to stop making games and just become a full-time YouTuber. But also, what if I completely ignored all of that and just got immediately started on making another video game? what could possibly go wrong? So, while I was working on videos for GMTK, like the one on Smash Brothers and Zelda's UI and Locator, I was secretly building this game in the background. I threw out the prototype code and started from scratch, with the goal of making a more stable, playable, and adaptable game. That meant adding in quality of life features like controller support, typing on the keyboard and drag and drop support, and the ability to save your run if you need to come back to it later. It meant making things more pretty with animations, more colour, and juicy numbers. And it meant, under the hood, the game could support all manner of different upgrades, like passive perks, active upgrades, special tiles, game-breaking synergistic stuff, the works. So, it was going well. And then I made a new video on GMTK. It was about coming up with game ideas, and it was actually the start of a new series called Game Dev 101, a series all about the production pipeline of making your own indie game, and how I kinda screwed it up for Mind Over Magnet. But this gave me an idea, because this new game, this word thingy, was the perfect opportunity to basically go through the development process again, and hopefully get it right this time. I could take everything I learned from making Mind Over Magnet and apply it to a second game, with the idea of making it more quickly and efficiently. That way I could do this Game Dev 101 series with a lot more authority. I wouldn't just have to talk about how I screwed everything up, I could also talk about how I got things right. So that was it. At the beginning of March, I decided to take 2 or 3 months off YouTube again and get to work on finishing this game. So, I kept building. I added more modifiers and upgrades to the shop, I endlessly fixed bugs, I tweaked the numbers to nerf the game-breaking power-ups and to buff the rubbish stuff, added in some really fun perks like a glass tile that can be used to temporarily clone a letter, or modifiers that build up score over time, and every time I added a perk, the game got better. And the more time I spent playing the game, the more I understood what made it fun. Which is basically, if the game is just find the longest word in this grid over and over again, well, that quickly gets boring. So I had to add in things to mix that up, like make shorter words, use specific letters, don't use letters, and so on. That's when the game gets really good. I also added in special rounds, kind of like the boss blinds in Balatro. These have unique requirements that force you to play in a special way, like your word must have 6 tiles to score, or you've got to use this specific letter, or the tiles refresh every turn. Those break up the game loop and change the game from just spell the longest word. I also playtested the game endlessly. I took the game to universities where I was doing talks, to game dev meetups, and the biggest one, GDC in San Francisco. When I was there, I would spend all day showing the game to different people and talking about the design and the balancing and the onboarding and everything else. Then I'd go back to my hotel, crash, wake up at 3 AM because of jet lag, and then immediately apply all of the feedback from yesterday's sessions before going back onto the expo floor. It was pretty exhausting, but I made some critical changes to the game during that time. For instance, initially I thought that the player should be penalised if they spell a word that's not in the dictionary. Like if you spell a wrong word, you should lose some points, right? But everyone hated this, especially those who don't speak English as their first language, or they have dyslexia, or they're just bad at spelling. It never felt good to be penalised for that. And also sometimes you have a word that you really think is a word, but it's not in my specific dictionary, and the game just goes, too bad, lose some points, game over. It just didn't feel good. So I took that out, and yeah, the game was much better for it. But I also tried to filter out feedback that went against the type of game I was going for. For instance, some people asked for the game to have a cartoon mascot or a more distinct art style, but I'm happy with the slick, clean, minimalist style. It's like a video game version of a GMTK video. And others asked for the sort of crazy, game-breaking synergies you get in Balatro, with the possibility of scoring essentially infinite points, but I'm going for more of a tabletop, Scrabble-esque game with smaller, easier to digest numbers. Anyway, back home, I was also posting about the game on Discord, and I showed a video of some of the animations. And then a user called Tunote decided to use it for sound design practice to make a video like this. And I was like, damn, that's pretty good. Can I just pay you to make all the sounds for this game? And so now this game has a sound designer. Oh, and I also reached out to Zach Jones, who did the epic soundtrack for Mind Over Magnet, and he's now hard at work on the music for this game. And then the game just sort of came together, and it's now almost done. I just have one last goal, and that's to bring the total number of perks up to 100. That feels like a nice round number to put on the Steam page. And as of this video, I have 88 made, 12 more to go. And so yeah, the game is called Wordplay. It's a word spelling, score chasing, perk choosing roguelike, and I'm super proud of it. It's really fun, it's really slick, and it's really addictive. Trust me, it's really hard for me to bug test this game because even if I go in looking for some specific thing to fix, I just end up playing the game for like half an hour. And look, I know that this isn't the first game about words, or the first roguelike word game, or the first game to mash up Balatro with a board game, but I'm still super happy with my version, and I hope you check it out. So if you head to Steam right now, you can play a free demo of Wordplay. It's super short, it's just got one mode and about a quarter of the total perks in the game, but it should give you a pretty good idea of what the game will be like when it launches later this summer. Also, while you're there, make sure you wish list the game on Steam, as that is the #1 way of telling the Steam algorithm to push my game to the top of the charts when it launches on the store. You'll also get an email as soon as the game launches, and as per usual, there will be a launch day discount to get the game at a super cheap price. I also totally plan to do a mobile version. The game works beautifully on an iPad, so I'll put it on the App Store and the Google Play Store at some point. I guess I'll do ads or in-app purchases or something. I don't really want to do that, but paid apps don't really work on those stores. If you work at Netflix and want to buy the rights to the mobile version of this game, call me. But yeah, I'm really pleased to say that the game has come together in record time. I made the first prototype at the end of December. I started the new version in January and February. I took the game to GDC in March. In April, I broke my goddamn arm. That was annoying. That slowed me down. But then in May, I basically finished the game, ready for release in June or July, depending on Next Fest and when Zach finishes the music and stuff like that. I'll talk more about these stages in future episodes of Game Dev 101, which is, as I say, pretty much exactly what I did this game for. But now, I really can go back to being a YouTuber. Because here's the thing. When I was showing this game to people at events like GDC or Guadalindi in Malaga, I talked to so many people who told me that GMTK was really important and influential to them. That my YouTube channel had changed their life in some way. Perhaps the videos got them interested in game design and led them to study the subject at school. Or that watching me make my own game in Unity inspired them to do the same. If this bozo can do it, so can you. Or that their GMTK Game Jam entry turned into a full game, and now they have a studio. Incredible. And so, as much as I like making video games, I really have enjoyed this process. I feel like I can do so much more here on YouTube. Basically, it's the difference between making a handful of games myself or inspiring people to make hundreds of games, or, let's be honest, looking at the Game Jam, tens of thousands of games. So while I will definitely make more games, I want to enter game jams and I want to do interactive video essay type stuff like Platformer Toolkit and other GMTK adjacent things, I think this really is the end of me making big proper games. I say that now, I will probably be back here in 6 months, but that's how I feel right now. So thank you so much for your patience, especially thank you to my patrons who have been there while I have not been making videos, because I've been working on games. Thanks for checking in, and thanks for finding out about Wordplay. You can wishlist the game on Steam, and it will come to other platforms, iOS and Android, eventually. Until then, I just want to say, see you soon, thanks for checking in, and have a tremendous day. Bye-bye. Ooh.
We have all been bombarded with these AI, dolly-generated thing, whatever they are, accessory, whatever the thing is, we've been bombarded with them on social media, and I am not a follower. I am the trendsetter that I have always been since I was about this big, which is probably the same size I am on your screen right now. This is Ground Affected. My name is your dad, and in this video, I'm going to be setting a new trend which probably not many people can follow. I don't know why I did that so awkwardly, but just listen to me, hear me out.
And then I got a message from my buddy George who said, Brent, you need to print yourself in a thing. And then you go, word. So
Anyway, imagine if I could make that really a real thing, instead of just a stupid picture from a freaking AI. We're gonna make it real, because that's way better. Imagine if I've already done that, and we are currently waiting for these things to dry, because they are already been primed, and this video is about me making that, but real, because I ain't lazy like that. By the way, look at how cute this little cover is for my uniformation printer. Oh, I'm so excited for this thing, I can't even tell you. Okay, so what I did, right, is I got hold of one of the guys that I know. He owns a Patreon. I don't even know how to explain this, but basically I was in a panic because I wanted to do this thing, but I don't do the trends, and I wasn't going to just copy stuff, so I contacted this dude from Nice X Collectibles. The guy that I know is one of the owners, and he's an incredible dude who helped me out. Basically, I sculpted all of these things myself. So these are my accessory pack. Yes, I modified it slightly because that ChatGPT is stupid. Anyway, so I made my own accessories pack, and then the dude from Nice X Collectibles got hold of one of his sculptors called Pablo Ospina, which I'm probably ruining that name, but it doesn't matter. I'm sure he will be okay with it. And they sculpted me. They sculpted the dolly, because there is absolutely no ways I have the skill enough to even be able to do that. Genuinely, I have not got that kind of skill at all, and I have too much to learn. Also, it took me way too long to do just the accessories, so here we are. And now that we have a 3D version of the thing on ChatGPT, I can now put it in to here and start to support these things. And I have printed all of the other bits that you saw. Please focus, camera. I've printed all the other bits that you saw on this Formlabs Form 4 machine. I have used actually their clear transparent resin, and this is because they say that this is the clearest resin that one can use. It can even be polished. Amazing. This is exactly what I need for this particular project, and I'm not even going to get this video approved before I post it, so hopefully they don't kill me. So I am currently waiting for the last piece of the puzzle to be done, and this is going to be the printer and the little paint bottles, and I've separated the plate from the printer just because I wanted it to go together a bit easier and look nicer. So this is what's happening right now. I need to get into painting the rest of the parts, and then we'll come back and take these bits out once they're done. Aside from the 3D models that are made, I need to make a background obviously as well. I need to make the card, and I've worked out that it fits almost exactly on an A4 piece of paper. I need to make a bunch of things actually, to be fair. I need to make the little logos or labels for the paints and also for the resin. By the way, can we all just agree that Pablo freaking nailed, he really nailed the likeness here. Like, this literally looks just like me. Down to even the ring that I custom made for myself, and the new one as well. I didn't even tell him this, by the way, and he even put the shoes that I wear. Literally the exact same shoes that I always wear. I don't know how he knew this, but he did it. Even the shoes, man, look at the tread. The tread is absolutely incredible. I want to say a massive thank you to Pablo. Genuinely, this is amazing. The work that you've done on this is incredible. And a huge thank you also to Nice X Collectibles for helping to facilitate this. Genuinely, if it wasn't for them, I was gonna have a really weird looking dolly. I will leave a link for them in the description. Please go check them out. Obviously, they didn't sponsor this video, but essentially, they were part of it as much as everyone else is. You're a part of it too because you're watching, so click like, click subscribe. Tell him Mama said hi. Okay, so I've basically worked on the labels. Essentially, all I did was use this application on my iPad called Procreate, and basically just drew most of them. I've just ruined it all. Anyway, once I've got the labels extrapolated, I can then print it. If my printer would actually come to life, please print, printer. So what I've actually done is I've made a couple of different sizes so that I can figure out the size that works the best. Then I'm going to print it on sticker paper and stick it onto the parts that need the sticker. I can already tell that it's all too big, so I'm going to just make it a whole load smaller and print it again. And the reason I was able to tell is clearly that is not going to fit on that bottle. So, and I know that everything is sized according to the size of the bottles, and so essentially none of that would fit. So I've just made the whole lot smaller, and we'll see which one is the right size, and then we might have to print another couple of pages. I'm sorry, trees and forest. Oh, it's so close. This might be the one. Let me cut it out and it's just too big. Little bit smaller. I was also thinking I needed to get this sprayed with the chrome because I can't touch it when it's chromed and it's going to take a little while to dry. But let's go see how long that printer is going to take. 22 minutes. It's nearly there. The annoying thing is that I literally need that can of Red Bull to paint with the chrome. And I'm waiting because of the printer, which is a little bit larger, that is just getting busy done now. It's got a couple more layers left to do. Another 300 or so. But basically, I'm waiting on that Red Bull. I need that Red Bull. Maybe I'll get a real Red Bull. Oh yes, I need a real one. But also we can check the size of this. By the way, I'm not killing the trees that bad. Look, I printed on the other side so that I wasn't wasting whole paper for nothing. Okay, so that is pretty much exactly what I'm looking for. That's the right size. And my printer sucks. So I'm going to have to go next door to the lady shop and ask to use her printer for label makers. But before I do that, I need the Red Bull and the bottle of paint so I can test their size. And again, I'm waiting for that in the machine. I guess something that I can do while I wait for that is I can actually paint these two bottles the color of the bottle of resin. Let me go get one so that I can try and match this color. Okay, so here is a bottle of resin. This is the Sunly resin that I normally use. So I want to match this exact color of bottle. I feel like it's brown. I'm pretty sure this is going to be close enough to the color that I need. Now I could color match if I wanted to. I could definitely do that, but I just feel like it's such a waste for one singular thing. I mean, look, that literally is the color that I need, but I'm not going to use it because I don't want to waste the colors. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do it. And now to use the most glorious of all washing, curing, washing. It's not a curing, it's just washing. But look at this. Okay, now I need to take it on my phone next door and see if she can print it for me. I'm just waiting for the clear coat on those little bottles of resin to dry, then I can stick on their stickers. And now I'm gonna paint the primer layers on the other bits that I printed already. So the Red Bull labels are printed on this water slide decal paper, and I'm gonna spray it with this gloss It's literally a cheap, crappy clear coat gloss. I'm gonna spray it so that it protects it, and then I'm gonna need to spray chrome onto the For the chrome, I'm gonna be using this stuff, which is a chrome from Green Stuff World. I'm still waiting for the chrome to dry. That's going to take possibly days. I don't know. I might ruin that when I try to put the decal on tomorrow, and that might make me cry. But I've put the Zenithal on the face and hands, and I need to start painting the body, and also, oh my god, there's too much to do. But basically, I need to get the skin tones on, and then I will be at a slightly better place and be able to judge how far I have left to go. I am an incredibly patient person, so I'm going to be taking this, dumping it in that water, and I'm just going to try to strap it onto that friggin' can, even if it does leave fingerprints in it. I'm hoping that I can just hold on to the sticker thing, the decal. If I can hold on to the decal, maybe it won't ruin the thing. It's probably going to ruin it, but who cares? Look at how cool these things are. I'm not even gonna lie here. Actually, this is a very proud moment on account of I've made a miniature Red Bull. Look at it. It literally, if this camera light would get out the way, it literally looks like a Red Bull. Oh my god. I like it. I like it a lot. The sandwich, it needs to be with the sandwich. Okay, let's get this stupid model done. It is now epically late. It is very late, actually. What is the time? It is now 8 o'clock. My wife's gonna kill me. Let me show you how far I've gotten. So as you know, I've gotten all the little bits and bobs done. Most of them anyway, because I still have to do the airbrush, which you can't see because it's not focusing. But don't worry about that. And now I have done the me. This is me. I am a miniature man standing next to my stuff. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. But my job isn't done yet, because what I need to do before I can even possibly think of going home is I need to quickly make the inside piece on the inside of the box where they hold the mod. It's like a backing to the clear piece.